Apologies for absence have been received from Jenny Cook, Councillor Andrew Cooper, Greg Dodd, Richard Goodfellow, Ian Holmes and Leah Stewart.
Thank you, thank you, Miles, and I have realised that I should have pressed my button earlier. I beg your pardon. Does that mean, Miles and Liz, can you advise us as to whether we're quorate for decision-making purposes for this meeting? Yes. We are. Fantastic. Okay. We move on to item 2 then, declaration of disposable pecuniary interest. Is there any member of the committee who's got any particular interest, pecuniary, financial interest in any item on this agenda? Not seeing them indicating, so we'll move on, thank you. Exempt information, item 3 on the agenda. We have this in case there are any contractual or employee issues that need to be discussed. And I don't think there are on this item, so there's no applicable items, so the whole of the meeting is open to the public. And if I could, excuse me, move on then to the minutes of the meeting that we held back on the 11th of July. Any comments or corrections to those minutes, or are people content to accept them as a correct record? They're quite lengthy minutes, actually. We obviously had a lot of discussion, and thank you, Miles, for keeping on top of what was really quite a lengthy discussion. Any comments or changes, corrections?
I had one on page 12. It was a reference to the work of Dr. Alan Palmer, and I just wanted to check whether or not it was Alan Palmer and not Andy Palmer.
Ooh.
Because I couldn't find the Alan Palmer.
I can't remember who mentioned it.
Neither can I, but obviously Andy Palmer is the chairman of Pod Point, but that's why I just wanted to check who he was related to.
Thank you. Very well spotted. Thank you. And, well, let me amend my recommendation to the meeting. Are people content with that correction, if it is required, to accept the minutes as a correct record of the previous meeting? Yep, I'm seeing agreement. Thank you very much. Now, I was going to say I wanted to welcome Jenny Cook from the Environment Agency, as it would be her first meeting, but I think she's actually one of the people who's given apologies. And welcome to Adam Ashman from Yorkshire Water, who I think our eyes have met across a crowded screen in the past. Shall we go around the table, folks, and just make sure, particularly for the benefit of the minutes and the correct record, and to make sure that everybody does know who's sitting around the table. I'm Councillor Jane Scullion. I'm the chair of this committee, and I'm also the leader of Calderdale Council. And I just wanted to say that the events that we just had in Calderdale, where we had yet another near miss in terms of flooding, make me want to use the term we often use in Calderdale, which is we live climate emergency in Calderdale. It's not an abstract concept to us, it's something very, very real. I'm pleased to say that it was a near miss. Many of the hard defences worked as they should do, and indeed some of the natural flood management things that we have done worked extremely well as well. But nonetheless, we suffered in some, particularly in the east of the borough. So my introduction is, I'm Jane Scullion and we live climate emergencies. So, Liz.
Thank you. So I'm Liz Hunter, the Director of Policing, Environment and Place at the Combined Authority. And again, just for new members, the reason that we use the speakers is partly about people being able to hear you, but also because that's the moment where the live streaming can locate where you are and who you are. So that's partly why we use it. So just for everyone's benefit when we go around the table, that's the importance of using it. Otherwise, you're talking in somebody else's picture. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Oliver Harmer, Chief Operating Officer at Natural England, and I think we're going to talk in just a second. following Councillor Scullion's introduction, I used to be, 2 years ago, the Director for Yorkshire at the Environment Agency, and I must admit I've seen my fair share of really distressing floods as well, and I think we all continue to live the climate emergency.
Yep. Hi, I'm Paul Duncan. I'm Natural England's Deputy Director with responsibility for the Yorkshire and Northern Lincolnshire team.
Councillor Sarah Ferraby from Bradford Council.
Which one's that? Okay, oh, sorry.
Councillor Jenny Kent from York Council.
Hello, Jim Cardwell, Northern Power Grid, and I guess also our customers were badly affected by the floods over the last couple of days. So we had 55,000 customers who had a power cut. Thankfully, we got everyone who could get back by Saturday night. But of course, there are some people who are still out of their homes, which is unfortunate for them, to say the least.
Hi everyone, my name is Adam Ashman. I work for Yorkshire Water. Again, to follow the theme, busy weekend dealing with the rain.
Hi, Tamsin Constable, Policy Officer at West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Hey everybody, Stacey White, Interim Head of Place and Consents in the Mass Transit team at West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Hi everyone, Nadia McPherson, Programme Lead here at West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Hi, I'm Ariba Rashid, I'm Project Manager in the Combined Authority.
Hello, my name's Sarah Brooke, I'm Programme Manager for Retrofit, including SHDF.
Hi, I'm Kevin Unwin, I'm a Policy Officer at the Combined Authority.
Hello, I'm Peter Glover, part of the research team at the Combined Authority.
Hello, I'm Martin Broadest, here on behalf of the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership. I'm employed by Connect Housing, which is a locally based charitable housing association.
Hello, I'm Neil Wally, Head of Environment and Sustainability at Northern Gas Networks.
Hi, I'm John Clark. I am a private sector representative and I work for Cummins.
Hi everybody, I'm Katie Dye, Councillor for Leeds.
Hi everyone, I'm David Omi from King and I'm a private sector representative. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Scott Patient from Calderdale Council.
Hi everyone, Jack Hemingway, Deputy Leader representing Wakefield Council.
Miles Larrington, Governance Services Officer, West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Alison Gillespie, Head of Place and Environment Policy at the West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Thank you all. Ooh. Is one of them still on? No? Just a bit of feedback. Okay. Let me just say a little bit now about progress since the last meeting by the way of a chair's update. And there has been significant progress. I hope everybody actually managed to have a break over the summer, including all the Combined Authority staff. But those of you who are new to the Combined Authority will perhaps not be as familiar as the rest of us in terms of the development of schemes that are funded through the collective of the Combined Authority. And part of that is making sure that we have evidence-based decision making and that we have good assurance in terms of our spend so that we can actually defend our spend with the Treasury and with the government. So sometimes the progress in terms of some of these schemes might seem a little slow, but oops, that's a bit of a Theresa May moment, isn't it? Don't worry about it, Liz. I think I know who I am and I don't necessarily need the reminder. So a lot of work is done by the Combined Authority in terms of developing the business cases and taking them through each of the stages of the Combined Authority quality and assurance decision-making process. So work has been done on the business cases for low-interest loans for retrofit activity, and you'll see a reference to that later in the papers. Solar on schools and community buildings, area-based demonstrator retrofit schemes, and again you'll see that in the papers later. Local area energy planning, which I keep wanting to call LEAP, but the initials are in the wrong way around. and working with the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership to deliver solar PV and battery storage on social housing. And there's more detail, as I said, in the later papers, and indeed on the update on the pledge delivery scheme. You'll also have had, and maybe not some of the new members, I'm not sure, Liz, we had a decision at the last meeting to try and see what our skills were. We did a bit of a skills audit in terms of our members, in terms, particularly for the new chair, in terms of understanding what we needed to upskill our own understanding of carbon reduction, carbon literacy, and a number of other things. We've currently had, I think, 8 responses from the voting members of the committee, and I think that's extremely helpful. If there's any last minute things, please do fill it in. And the officers are working on any training needs, because there are some people round this table with enormous depth in one particular area of the work of this committee, and there are others, I would include myself in that, who perhaps have a slightly shallower knowledge of some of the areas. So understanding what it is we need in terms of training and making sure that we actually have that to upskill us is really important. The other thing I wanted to say by way of introduction and update is what I would put under the heading of climate chat, because we are looking, or I say we, the Mayor and the 5 authorities, are looking to launch a public conversation soon about our activities around climate and the way in which we're going to tackle this emergency. And so some of you will know about the big bus chat that the Mayor did recently, which was actually very successful, and those of you who travel regular buses will have seen it everywhere, the posters. But looking at that general chat, general communications with the public of the 5 West Yorkshire districts, but also to include some more in-depth work and over a reasonable amount of time to have a bit of an attitudes and perceptions survey, which I think would be interesting. Specific engagement for young people, and we think that is obviously crucial, and thinking about different ways and effective ways of doing that. Some community conversations and thinking about particular groups and areas where we might have those conversations. And also making sure that in each of the 5 council districts that we make sure that we've got strong links to local authority climate and environment emergency web pages, so trying to integrate it with what is already happening, because each of the councils already do a great deal of this. And also we think that would be helpful in terms of signposting the combined authorities work to the districts and vice versa. So I think it will be generally a good idea. So watch out for that climate chat. I'm not sure what it's actually going to be called. Do we know quite yet, Liz? Is it definitely climate chat?
I think we're working on the exact title, but pretty much that.
Along those lines. So thank you. Okay, watch out for that. You heard it here first. Okay, if we could move on. I don't think I've got anything else to update, Liz. No? Thank you, and a big welcome to Gideon. We've only just started. You're very welcome.
Chair, sorry for being late.
Not at all. Let's move on then, if we may, to item 6, governance arrangements. Now, those of you who are at the last committee will know that we did have some discussion in terms of just shaping up and sharpening some of our governance issues, and progress has been made since that last meeting. And Liz, I think you've got a report on that.
Thank you, Chair. So really value the conversation we had last time around this committee, and so the things that we've done, which are now reflected back in the paper, which is here for your some for which to note and some for which to kind of have a conversation about. So you asked us to go away and think about health representative on the committee. We've approached the Integrated Care Board, and we have Ian Holmes, who will be joining us, and the Combined Authority actually agreed that at their last meeting, so we've made some progress. Unfortunately, Ian was unable to attend at this meeting, but will hopefully be at future meetings. So I think that's a really important way for our health colleagues to be around the table, both in terms of the health outcomes that I think this agenda supports, and also recognising the implications of the NHS on the climate and sustainability. So there's two aspects for Ian being around the table, which is great. The paper also notes the changes, which we've already mentioned to our colleagues from the Environment Agency and Yorkshire Water, so welcome. And then you asked us to go away and consider how we might be able to seek the views of young people and feed that into this committee. I won't run through it all, Chair. There's a few suggestions in the paper, and the climate conversation or chat, which you've just mentioned, is also an opportunity to do that. So we are trying to pursue those things that it says in the paper, and particularly looking at there's two things. One is our organisational wide approach to understanding and engaging with young people, and climate fits in that, but also there's some specific things we want to do, particularly around the climate conversation. So welcome any comments or views on those, but hopefully you'll see that we've taken on board your feedback.
Thank you. And can I just confirm what we discussed at the last committee, which is that we won't have a deputy chair until the LEP stuff is sorted out.
Thank you. Yes, so we are looking forward to a new deputy chair from the LEP board. The LEP is changing, as many of you will know, and there has been further recruitment, including a new, rather than calling it a LEP chair, there'll be a new business advisory chair for that group, but there is still a group of private sector members, one of whom will ask to be deputy chair for this committee. I'm hoping that will happen in November and be rectified by the Combined Authority in December. So by February, Chair, I am hopeful.
I love these long-term horizons for decisions, although we can never be as bad as Network Rail, whose planning horizons are at least 2043, if not later, actually. Thank you, Liz. And I'm really pleased to welcome, when he is able to attend, Ian Holmes from the Health Services. And I think that focus on the primary care end of primary care, social care, health in the community end of things has got a strong link with our work around housing, transport, air quality, all of those things. I think that's absolutely right. So really pleased about that. And I'm sure we'll all welcome him at the next meeting. And welcome to the new members from the Environment Agency and Yorkshire Water. I wouldn't mind the committee just having a quick look at, is it 2.6 onwards within, sorry, 2.8 onwards in the papers, just see there what is said about young people, because I think possibly we had, maybe slightly naively, some sort of idea that we could find the ideal young person who would represent all other young people and would come to this committee. And I think we realised that that was indeed naive. And there's description there of the kind of things that have been done so far in terms of thinking around youth representation, and indeed, as Liz says, thinking about the climate conversation or the climate chat events that are coming up. In terms of what's described there from 2.8 to 2.18 in the paper, any further comments on youth representation, or are people relatively content to live with that for the moment and have it as work in progress, I guess?
Thank you. I think it's a good list. It looks like a list of activities that would reach a significant number of young people, and I think that's important. I think the key thing that we need to be aware of is what happens after that engagement. When we've collected that information, we have the voices of young people from all the different areas that are mentioned in those paragraphs. What then will happen with that information? One, to make sure that they actually are a voice that you know is having an impact, but two, to then be able to feed back to them and say, this is what you said and this is what it's led to. So a two-way kind of thing, really, I think is important.
Thank you. Yeah, really important. So as always with these types of engagements, the team will look at the responses, and I'm expecting that to be able to come back to the committee so you can see that. But yeah, I completely agree. I don't want this just to be a kind of one-off. It needs to be the start of a conversation. So whilst we'll obviously have we'll have surveys, etc., that will be live for certain amounts of time, and we'll go and engage with certain groups. This is this is a longer term project, so we'll be talking to the team about how we can, once we've built those relationships, how we might be able to maintain them. So it's a really great point. Thank you.
Gideon?
Yeah, I was also thinking about a broader reach as well through the likes of the Scouts and all of that kind of associations. There's a lot of work going on there, even at the squirrel level, which is like the real tots, where they're actually being taught about environmental things at the moment, which is good news. But I think there's an opportunity to use that network and that leadership to actually support and help getting out. And there's other organisations that are similar that do that. Can I just step one stage back briefly, and that's to what Yorkshire Water being here, which I'm really happy to see, not Yorkshire Water, sorry, the Environment Agency, really happy to see you being here. Apologies already.
I'm sure there's a compliment there.
No, it wasn't that you weren't meant to be. Sorry, it's been a long day already. But it's not just about flooding. We need to have a broader sense of what's coming back from the Environment Agency would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Gideon. Jack?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree broadly with the recommendations outlined in the report. I think for me, it is right that we research the appropriate methods of engagement. I do think, though, as well, we need to see how young people want to be engaged. Let's have some co-design around this. How do they want to be involved? What works for them might not necessarily work for us. So under 212, it would be good perhaps if the Mayor's Climate Conversation could ask young people that question. How do you want the Combined Authority to work with you and to listen to your ideas and get their feedback on that idea?
Thank you. Any more for... I think we're all, if you'll excuse me, I think we're all slightly outside the target age group in terms of the... so Jack's point is a very useful one, really. I exclude officers, of course, from that comment. Okay, as the committee, happy to note the appointment of the NHS representative, note and welcome the change in membership of this committee, and to note what the work ongoing in terms of engaging with young people. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on then quickly to monitoring indicators, and I think, Peter, you're going to do some work on this for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So there's a paper that covers this item at page 21, and also an appendix, which I think wasn't in the original pack, but Miles has kindly circulated separately. So the background to this is that at each committee meeting we report on the state of the region indicators that are most relevant to the remit of the committee. So those indicators are agreed, and it's designed this is designed to provide context to the discussions of the committee. So in terms of the update and the reporting, we do that by exception, and we only update on indicators for which data has changed, for which new data has become available. And we also, as I mentioned, provide an appendix which visualises the latest data for all the indicators, and that's purely for reference. So the indicators are listed in the paper, but there are a number of additional indicators which have come forward through the West Yorkshire Plan consultation process, and they relate to the deployment of electric buses and also electric vehicle charge points. So I'll cover those as well in this item. At the last committee meeting, there was a detailed discussion of the emissions related indicators. So I don't propose to go through those again at this meeting, but the conclusion of that discussion was really that there's a huge challenge presented by emissions reduction, and an accelerated rate of progress is required. So what I propose to do now is briefly touch on the headlines for each indicator that's presented in the paper. And what I should say is that when the State of the Region report is published, that will provide a lot more detail on each of the indicators. So starting out with building energy efficiency, What we use here as a core indicator is energy performance certificate data, which I know a lot of the members of the committee have reservations about. The reason we use it is because it's readily available and it provides a comparative picture, both over time and relative to other areas. And the latest figures show that 35% of dwellings in West Yorkshire have an EPC rating of C or higher, which is actually 7 percentage points lower than the national average of 42%. Having said that, the picture is improving. So looking at the latest EPC lodgements for Q2 of this year, 54% of those lodgements make the threshold of C or above, compared with 58% nationally. So it's higher than the existing stock of lodgements, overall stock of lodgements. And if we look at new builds, 91% of lodgements for new builds during that quarter met the threshold of C or above, whereas for existing dwellings it was 49%. So turning to flooding now, which is obviously, we've touched upon, is at the forefront again in terms of everybody's thoughts, and also it's a key test of society's resilience in the face of the effects of climate change. We update this analysis each year around premises at risk of flooding, and the latest figures show that 3.4% of residential properties, or around 35,000 in absolute terms, are in a flood zone. That rises to more than 6% of Calderdale properties. In terms of commercial properties in flood zones, the figure's 15,000 in absolute terms, or 14% of total commercial properties, rising to 22% in Calderdale. And details of those sort of variations at local authority are contained in the appendix. Turning now to access to green space. So this is an indicator that we measure using Natural England sort of methodologies, GIS layers. Obviously, the benefits to health and well-being arising from engaging with green space are well documented, so that's why it's one of our core indicators. And the indicator that we use for this as our core indicator is the proportion of population living within 300 metres of an area of accessible natural green space of at least 2 hectares in size. And based on this indicator, the average for West Yorkshire is 23%, with a variation of between 15% in Kirklees and 28% in Leeds. More details in the appendix. We also have additional indicators relating to access to green space, which are set out in the State of the Region report, which is forthcoming. Since the committee last met, new figures have become available relating to fuel poverty. And obviously fuel poverty is an important issue from the point of view of economic inclusion, but also energy efficiency and emissions reduction. So the latest official figures published by government show that 17% of households in West Yorkshire are in fuel poverty, compared with a national average of 13%. Now these figures only relate to 2021 and of course don't take account of recent developments. So for that reason, the Combined Authority has calculated its own estimates, and the latest figure that we have is for July 2023, at which point we estimate that 30% of households are in fuel poverty in West Yorkshire, compared with 22% nationally. So obviously a huge challenge there. We're in the process of updating these figures again to take account of the recent changes in the off-gem price cap. So turning now to the deployment of public electric vehicle charging infrastructure. I think there's an item on a substantive item on the agenda about this as well. The key message here is really that we've seen a rapid rollout of EV charging infrastructure, but from a low starting point. So we have an installed base of 981 devices across West Yorkshire as of July 2023. And this is a 41% increase year on year and 140% increase over 3 years. So rapid growth, but from a relatively low base. If you look at the prevalence of public devices, it's below the national average in West Yorkshire. So relative to population, and the paper's not clear here, but I should say it's relative to 100,000 of population. The ratio in West Yorkshire is 42, compared with 67 nationally. But we do have a higher prevalence of rapid and above charging devices. So the ratios here are 14 for West Yorkshire versus 12 per 100,000 population, nationally. Again, there's more detail in the appendix, but a lot of that performance is driven by leads. So there are around 321 rapid charging devices in West Yorkshire in total. And then the final point around the electric bus fleet, we've started to monitor this based on figures supplied by bus operators. And the latest figures show that 2% of the total bus fleet consists of battery-powered buses. So that's a quick overview. And back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for the appendix in particular. I'm sorry that came round late, because if you get a chance to look at the graphs in there and the bar charts, they really are quite striking, actually. I wonder if I could just mention a couple of things in that report that particularly struck me, and other people will have other things. And I think you referenced it in your introduction in terms of some of the shortcomings of any such statistical analysis in terms of rubbish in, rubbish out. Just querying some, and I've asked our officers in Calderdale to take a further look at the access to green space one, because it has been used in the Combined Authority documents. And I think both Calderdale and Kirklees come out as areas with very little access to green space compared with, say, Leeds and Bradford. And it just seems completely counterintuitive in terms of both of them having very, very large semi-rural hinterlands and not great inner city areas. So I've asked the officers to go away and do a bit of looking at what the methodology is there, because it does give you the impression that Calderdale is wall-to-wall concrete, and it really is not. So that was one thing. The other thing, and it relates to your update in terms of statistics about, well, a number of things, but particularly about electric vehicles, etc. And I attended, and I expect one or two of you around the room may well have also attended, a session run by the National Grid last week. I don't know if anybody else was there. And one of the things that was being discussed there, certainly at the tables, the small tables, matter of discussion was how we, as the Combined Authority and as a set of 5 districts, do projections looking forward in terms of demand, and how some of that demand is met by the National Grid and the transmission routes, and what the waiting lists are in terms of large housing build, decarbonisation of fleet and bus depots and all of those kind of things, and looking forward in terms of projecting where we're going to be on demand for West Yorkshire in terms of clean and green energy, and how we make sure that we get into the planning and projections for that. One of the things that was a surprise to me in terms of the National Grid's figures is that West Yorkshire is a net consumer of electricity rather than a net generator, of course, of electricity. And that's because we are a manufacturing and business area. That's our profile. And certainly as we go through some of the papers, thinking about ways in which we might also be involved in generation might be something that's fruitful to think about. But it was just something, looking particularly electric vehicle charging infrastructure and looking about our future demand as we decarbonise, particularly public transport, of where we are in the queue to get connected up to some of these new things. So those were my points. I don't know what comments people have got in terms of the indicators. Were there any surprises? Martin.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of points. It wasn't in the paper, but you mentioned it in your presentation. 91% of new builds reach EPCC or above, which suggests 9% don't, which I find staggering. If that's true, surely that's something we ought to be as influencing on. That's extraordinary. The second one is, can you just say which definition of fuel poverty you're using?
Right, so let me me just check that one. So it's the same one as the government used in their latest figures. They've changed over, haven't they, recently?
Yeah. In which case, it's the one that says if you live in an EPC property or better, you are not classed as being in fuel poverty, no matter what your income is, which is a nonsense. So the 30% that we're estimating is, I would say, inevitably an underestimate of reality. Thank you.
That's very interesting, Martin. Thank you for that. And Peter, you did caveat your presentation on this in terms of some of the critique of some of the methodology by which those statistics are developed and collected. So that's certainly one for us to look at. We did have a similar figure, and I can't remember what was the combined authority at this previous committee, about the fact that Calderdale in particular, in terms of new build with EPC C and above, was already falling down. And again, going back to the ranch, I've asked for further information on that. But it's shocking in this day and age that that is actually possible to do that, given that we're in the Pennines. Anybody else? Gideon.
Just on 2.5, you've got deployment of electric buses, and then you've got electric buses under the third point. Are they one and the same, or is that something different?
Sorry, yeah, that is an error that's just mentioned twice.
Okay, that's fine. I was wondering if we could also, though, think about this in terms of electric miles or zero carbon miles as well. And if we could get that information, then maybe people would see it in terms of their journeys as opposed to just how many buses we've got. So I don't know if that's possible. That would be, I think, quite a good one to send that message. I certainly, like you, Chair, picked up on Kirklees and was scratching my head a lot. This idea in terms of the EPCs, maybe it's for later conversation, but it did bring to mind that maybe we should be looking for incentives in some form or another. And I don't mean financial incentives, but some way of pushing companies in a nudging sort of way into doing better than C. So, and heading to B, and maybe if you do that, you're recognised by Wicker or something with a badge or whatever, but something to promote that they're going above and beyond, because we can't do anything from a legal point of view. But it would be useful to give a nudge in that way to sort of move it forward in that. And just finally, each of these, it feels like there could be a dashboard somewhere that people could see on the website maybe. I don't know if we're there yet, but it might be useful to have people physically seeing that things are changing and going down. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very interesting, particularly in terms of what you say about incentivising our large house building companies. I'm thinking about the mayor's work on the Fair Work Charter as, in this case, something that companies should be working towards, and whether there is any mileage in that, and if officers can take that away and take a look at it. Jim, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, thank you. It was just to just answer your question. I wasn't there at the National Grid event last Tuesday, but a couple of my colleagues were. In fact, one of them was on stage giving a sort of local view. So National Grid run the sort of the big wires, the transmission system over the whole of GB, and we run the local wires. So quite often, if we're talking about electric vehicle charging or heat pumps in housing and those kind of things, it's connected to our network, and that's why we were really keen to get involved in that event. So we're spending a lot of our time speaking to the likes of the people to my left here at the combined authority, and also in the particular areas, and the local area energy plans, the LEAPs, if you want to call them that, are keen to this, because I think that's about making sure that we do get that down to the neighbourhood level, really, and that's something that National Grid don't do, if you like, we do. When we're talking about electric vehicle charging plans and things, we're really keen that the local electricity grid supports the connections that people want today, plus into the future, as we look further up the uptake. So it was just to say, yeah, that was a good event. and we were glad to be there. And there's lots of other things going on alongside it. We might come back to that when we get to one of the papers a bit later on in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I say that your colleague Lizzie was very good?
Excellent. I'll pass that back to her. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else indicate. So I beg your pardon, Scott.
That's okay. Just briefly, and I think the benefit of sort of data sets are a good thing. I'm mindful about charts that pit sort of one authority to another, and I'm sure some of us in local authority are aware of being on charts about where we stand. However, in the interest of enjoying some of the data sets featured here, I'm just wondering if there's the ability for data to be broken down for all local authority areas in the way that the property energy efficiency areas have been. Not in terms of competition, just in terms of knowledge.
Thank you. I don't know, Peter or Liz, if you want to come back on that, whether that's something to take away in the work with the individual districts.
Just to come back on the point about the dashboard, first of all, we do have a State of the Region dashboard, which includes these indicators, and that does have the facility to actually break all the data down by local authority. But what we can do in future packs, if it's of interest, is present a local authority breakdown for all the indicators where we have data.
Thank you very much. Okay, if we could just, beg your pardon.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, just 2 points. I thought the statistics were really good, so I liked that. I just wondered, is there a forward projection in terms of targets that we're aiming for, so that we know what we're striving to get to? And the second point was more around I think Gideon, you mentioned green energy. So do we see the blend of energy in the region, so green versus non-renewable, and is that reported anywhere?
So we don't have targets for all of the indicators. I think the main focus in terms of targets is on the emissions related ones. So we do have a carbon emission reduction pathway figure where we project the rate of progress that's required to achieve net zero. And I think that's in the appendix. So we don't necessarily have targets for all the indicators, but I mean, maybe that's something that we need to develop. In terms of the sort of energy mix, that's something that we've discussed in other committee meetings. So there are data available. We don't report them regularly as part of the State of the Region indicators, but they certainly are available. We can sort of refer you to the previous papers where we sort of presented those.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to bring David in and then Alison. No, okay. David.
Thank you. So the first thing I want to say is, as regards the indicators, I'm just curious to find out why we are limiting our calculation of greenhouse gases to just carbon dioxide, because there are other, gases more potent or more dangerous to the environment. So do we have a system in place that monitors or checks these? Secondly, as a result of flooding, as a result of the rainfall, we've experienced disruption in transportation, and I'm concerned that if this persists, those who live in West Yorkshire will probably want to opt for getting vehicles, and once we have more vehicles on the way, that would also increase. So what strategies are we putting in place to ensure that the disruptions in transportation, public transportation as a result of flooding, does not, escalate the issue? So next, I want to talk about the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. It's great that we are making advances in this regard, but I'm more concerned about taking this outside the scope of, emissions to zero waste. The 8 electric vehicle charging companies exhibiting, and none of them had an end-of-life plan for the product. They all bragged about, warranties and all of that, but what do the consumers do with the products post-consumption? That's also in time. but carbon exports. So how are we sure that what measures are we putting in place to ensure that we are not consciously or unconsciously exporting our carbon to other regions? Are we also keeping track of our scope 3 emissions? Need more transparency as regards how these numbers were collated. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Covered a lot of ground there, and I think some of the issues will be picked up in the later papers, particularly around the transport issues. And interesting what you say about EV and end of life. Just been having a discussion with developers who have applied for a wind farm in Calderdale, a very large green energy generation project, and asking the question. It's a question that Scottish wind farms have begun to ask: what happens at the end of life? What is the possibility in terms of recycling? What happens to these things? And I think that's a very timely question. In terms of the gases, in terms of flooding and transport and carbon export, I don't know, Liz, if you want to come back here or whether there are things later on the agenda.
Thanks. They're really good points, and I think on EVs, let's come back when James is here. He's from our transport team to understand whether he's in any conversations. I think on exporting carbon, I don't know if we have any data on exporting carbon. Actually, I'm kind of looking to Peter to whether we do or not. But it's a really good point, and one I think we need to build into the next wave of our plans. So yeah, thank you. Helpful.
Thank you. And the methodological question is one I think that we all need to keep an eye on. So I think you've got that, Peter, in terms of just making sure we understand those statistics. Well, thank you all, and we note the headline indicators and progress on those, and we look forward to the next one and to bearing down on some of those target areas. If we could move on then to item 8, and that's over to you, Liz, to welcome our guests and presentation for this committee.
Thank you. So it's really great to welcome Oliver and Paul. Thank you for coming. Really, the paper is an introduction to then enable you to do your presentation. But we have got team members here who are working on our local nature recovery strategy and the work we're doing in partnership with yourselves. So I think, Chair, if it's all right, we'll pass over for your presentation, and then we're happy to open it out to any questions for either yourselves or to the team who are also here. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, and thank you for inviting us, and also thank you for being what feels like at the forefront of many of these very difficult society challenges. Many other parts of the country are grappling with exactly the same, in fact, all parts of the country. But I think you feel like you're pioneering the way, so that's great to see. So we're both from Natural England. I'm going to talk slightly more generally around what we're trying to do nationally, and I think Paul's going to come on to talk about local nature recovery strategy and give some local context. We're not going to talk through the slides one by one, but they're kind of briefing background material in your packs, if that's okay. I think, first of all, I just don't want to take for granted that everyone knows who Natural England are. So we're part of Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, if you like, a sister body to the Environment Agency, sister body to the Forestry Commission as well, probably names that you recognise. We've been through a period of significant growth, actually, which is quite rare for a public body, and that follows the Environment Act back in 2021, which set out a lot of new tools and powers, local nature recovery strategies being one. But really, in recognition that, I guess it's why we're sitting on the table, we are tackling a nature emergency as well as a climate emergency, and I think many of us, I'm sure, recognise they're opposite sides of the same coin. In coming today, we looked at your West Yorkshire Climate and Environment Action Plan, and there is honestly tremendous synergy between what we're trying to do nationally and what you're trying to do locally. In fact, it's scary just how comparable the aims and objectives are. That's great to see, and I think therefore the conversation I'd really like to understand is what can we do better together in comparison to how we're already working, because I think our aims and objectives feel very, very aligned. Just taking a step back, so I mentioned earlier I used to be the Yorkshire Area Director at the Environment Agency. it goes without saying that across Yorkshire, particularly West Yorkshire, we're sitting on some amazing natural environments, which not every part of the country has. The challenge, of course, which we just alluded to in the last agenda item, is that not everyone has the same level of access to experience all the benefits those environments give to each one of us. So that the people aspect is a major driver alongside the nature aspect, and it's literally both together. Natural England's mission then is to build partnerships for nature's recovery. The word partnership is absolutely key because we cannot possibly get even close to making progress alone. It has to be through national partnerships and through crucially place-based local partnerships, such as right here today. And I think across the kind of, if I call it conservation sector, there's a recognition that protecting the kind of good bits of what we've got left simply hasn't worked and isn't going to work in the future. And therefore, Natural England's mission, again through partnership, is very much to look at a bolder range of tools to integrate nature, climate with every other part of planning to genuinely drive change at a landscape scale. So it's less about site-based, it's more about landscapes, and that's landscapes for a whole range of purposes. And that's clearly about thriving nature. It's about access, and we talk about green in 15. Everyone having 15 minutes, everyone living within 15 minutes of quality green space. And obviously the climate resilience aspects, the carbon aspects, the water quality aspects, which we hear so much about, the health aspects, they're all intertwined. So it's about what can that all do for us as society. Just talking about the kind of new tools, and many of you will have heard acronyms. Hopefully this puts in a little bit of context, but I'll keep it fairly high level. So the local nature recovery strategy, which you are leading for West Yorkshire, we're the kind of support national expertise, if you like. So very much we're in a facilitative role. That's one of 50 across the country, and they're so critical because in order to get landscape scale nature recovery, we need a strategic plan. And that strategic plan has to sit alongside and be integrated within wider planning. It can't sit on a shelf and be an add-on. So the LNRS, the Local Nature Recovery Strategy, is the first time we're going to do those across the country. But there are a number of other tools as well. So some of you, and I met Councillor Scullion at this, was in Bradford recently, we launched the latest 6 big nature recovery projects. And there are going to be 25 across the country of these by 2025. And we've got one here for Bradford and the South Pennines. And that's really us, again, facilitating and providing some kind of seed corn investment to really empower, local community and local authority-led a whole range of partners in a specific place, particularly where we have some intractable issues, including lack of access to quality green space. Biodiversity net gain is coming in next year, which is a policy for new developments to not just cause no detriment to the environment, but actually to go beyond that and to make the environment a better place. So the link between BNG, biodiversity net gain, and local nature recovery strategy is that if we've got a strategic plan about where we want more nature that's embedded into wider planning, we can also plan where income from BNG, from developers, can be used to drive and actually incentivise that better delivery on the ground. Green social prescribing, it's a bit of jargon in a sense, but this is about how linking to the health agenda and thinking differently around prescriptions and using green opportunities alongside other aspects of social prescribing to actually tackle some quite acute health issues and thinking quite a different way around what healthcare looks like, and using that as part of our toolkit to really improve access and the well-being benefits of access to quality green space. So that's something that we're facilitating nationally, but again, a conversation around what could collaboration look like in that area. And then finally, we're working very much with the Environment Agency on catchment scale approaches. Again, links into local nature recovery strategies, and I'm part of a DEFRA steering group trying to set out the policy framework for this. But that's really important because if we're to tackle water quality and sewage in our rivers, we need to regulate the water industry and work with the water industry, but also work with farmers through initiatives like catchment sensitive farming. Natural England have got representatives all across West Yorkshire working with the farming community on that angle. I'll stop there. A lot of information. Paul, do you just want to add on LNRS and then we'll open it up?
A little about LNRS and a little about the nature recovery project, if I may. So LNRS, as Oliver's already said, that's going to set basically the plan for how we're going to recover nature across the country. We've got 4 in Yorkshire. West Yorkshire's a key one of those. I have a small dedicated team towards the delivery of LNRS for facilitation with each of the relevant authorities. But the other arm's length bodies, the other Forestry Commission and EA also have some resource into that as well, and it's our Natural England's job to sort of brigade that, bring it together, and then help you guys with that information. So hopefully that's working well. I think we have regular contacts with the Combined Authority towards pushing that forward. And as I said, that's gonna set the baseline for how we move forward. We can't completely stand still in the meantime while that's being prepared, though. And as Oliver's already mentioned, the launch of the nature recovery project, particularly Bradford and the South Pennines, obviously one of the more important ones, with it being in Yorkshire based, was done earlier in the year. Large area, we've selected an area of about 30,000 hectares. Hugely diverse, but in terms of both landscape, you've got the wide, expansive areas of the South Pennine Moors, huge carbon store up there that needs to be secured, needs to improve the resilience of that area. Sweeping down into the urban areas of Bradford and Calderdale, homes of many sort of diverse, disconnected communities, and the project's about not only improving the resilience and the quality of the landscape outside the urban areas, but bringing it within the urban areas and bringing the people within the urban areas out into the countryside as well. So facilitating those health benefits, facilitating greater access to green space and nature. We have other tools that we use that can also feed into the delivery of nature recovery and the delivery of the LNRS. Oliver's already mentioned BNG, Biodiversity Net Gain, and how that's going to be rolled out. But there's other things like green finance that we'll explore as part of the nature recovery project. But also established methods like agri-environment schemes currently have countryside stewardship. Our team delivering catchment sensitive farming that looks at air and water pollution and farming systems. There's a lot to go at. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Oliver. Somebody want to start? Jenny.
This is fantastic. Can I just ask what scale you go down to? Because you're looking at a broad area, but for example, coming from York or any of the districts within the region, do you actually have a measurement of land space that you're going down to or not?
Could you expand on that one?
So you talk about 30,000 hectares. What's the smallest parcel of land you're looking at? Not sure about my microphone.
So some of the projects are very large scale. So we have Peat for Climate or Nature for Climate funding, the Peat Capital Grant Scheme, which will cover thousands of hectares of peatland restoration. But other projects that we're dealing with will be a single project on a community farm. It can encompass the whole range.
I suppose what I'm asking, which may be too detailed, is part of this mapping the whole of the region or all the land in the whole of it, and if so, to what detail, or is it picking projects from that as being most important?
Okay, the Nature Recovery Project is about picking projects rather than mapping particular areas. Some of that mapping and opportunity mapping will be done through others. You might want to do that through the LNRS.
I can just comment as well. So I think the big benefit of the local nature recovery strategy is to have a strategic approach, which we're all working to. So, literally all partners working to. But, it can't just sit on a shelf. That has to develop a pipeline of projects. So what does this mean in terms of a action plan going forwards? how are we going to together raise the green finance, leverage as much public funding from central government, bring in the third sector to make best use of their volunteering networks. All of it together, I think, is the real opportunity posed by local nature recovery strategies. And I think, therefore, I wouldn't want to give a threshold. I think it's change at all levels. It's really exciting.
Thank you. I've got Jack and then Gideon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for the presentation and slides. I think it's a really exciting project to see the sort of immense resources we have in West Yorkshire utilised in this way to create potentially a new national nature reserve, something really special and play a big part in nature recovery is great. I think my question is, I suppose, more aimed at combined authority officers coming from the Wakefield side and perhaps those parts of Leeds and Kirklees that don't fall into this particular project. I just wouldn't want us to lose focus on B&G funding and support going to those areas as well, because one of the main things, you've got a lot of growth areas for housing and economic development in those areas, and residents are really keen to see improvements in nature stay as local as possible. So just a plea really to ensure that we do have some projects in those areas as well, and I'm sure we will, but I just have to say that from a Wakefield point of view.
Thank you. And biodiversity net gain is clearly going to be absolutely crucial in terms of those new developments. I've got Gideon and then Martin.
Yeah, thank you for that. I should probably do a declaration of interest actually at this point, because the South Pennine Parks, my wife is a trustee of River Home Connection, which is one of the beneficiaries of that scheme. So I'll mention that now, although I haven't got anything to do with it myself. A few things here. One, I wondered if you could maybe talk about your connections with White Rose Forest Partnership and how all of that integrates together. Again, a declaration, my wife is on that board for River Home Connection, but it's just an interest I have in it on that question. In terms of biodiversity net gain, it was alluded to earlier that Section 106 money is used then for that. It would be very helpful to understand, and I know with some of my other hats, that we're trying to understand how much of that Section 106 money is actually going into where it should go into, how much of it is being given away because developers aren't able to do it, or they say so, and things like that. So I wondered if there's some metrics or something that you've got that we could understand a bit better about that side of it. And then the other final one is, in terms of the West Yorkshire strategy, is there any way that other people can get involved? I don't know who's involved in it, but it would be one to be interested in. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just take Martin and then I'll ask the officers to come back.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, also on biodiversity net gain. And I say this as a developer and somebody who is generally enthusiastic about the concept of BNG. I think we'd all agree that brownfield development or development on brownfield sites is better than on virgin or greenfield sites. But there is a bit of tension, policy tension, because many brownfield sites, particularly ones which have been allowed to go wild and rewild through many years of neglect, actually they can be very, very biodiverse, and the calculation is based on a site-specific basis. So actually developing those brownfield sites can be very challenging in terms of BNG compared to a neighbouring farmer's field, for example. So I just draw the attention to the potential policy tension in terms of planning versus BNG.
Thank you. Oliver, Paul, do you want to pick some of those things up?
Yeah. Yep, so from the White Rose Forest side of things, we have quite a lot of involvement in that. We're part of this we have a team of people who look at woodland planting applications as they come in, and we advise forest tree planting applications. To facilitate that, I sit on a steering group with White Rose Forest, Woodland Trust, and the DEFRA tree planting side of things, to sort of smooth that over and try and facilitate schemes going forward. But we also, as part of the nature recovery project, we have schemes that are being delivered by White Rose Forest. So they're looking at, as an example, the potential impact of tree planting on ground nesting bird populations through things like predator shadow.
Thanks, Paul. So, Gideon, I don't know offhand your question about section 106, but if you give me your details, we'll go away and find out if that's okay. It's a good question, of course. With BNG, it's got to work as a system, and we've got to be able to track. And one thing we're building in Natural England is it sounds a bit jargon again, but it's a register team, so that there is a clear audit trail and a really, really transparent process between developer contribution and outcome delivered. And that lasts over a long period of time. That isn't just for today. Sounds simple, it's not. On the West Yorkshire strategy, I mean, again, that's a good question. Paul, do you want to describe how we're supporting it? But Wicker officers might want to describe the governance being put in place.
I'm not sure. I'm not up to speed on the West Yorkshire strategy, I'm afraid.
Okay, so we've got a lead local nature recovery strategy officer for each of the 50 around the country. And their job is to work with you directly to facilitate in the best way. Well, really, I think we want to be guided by yourselves in terms of how you want to use that. But we'll bring national expertise and evidence and help share good practice around the country.
Thank you. And Tamsin, who is here, is our lead on the work. And there has been a paper previously to committee seeking volunteers, but I appreciate not everybody's always at the committee, so we're very happy to have you involved. So if you want to drop us a line to Tamsin, we were looking for nominations from the committee onto the steering group. Very happy to have you, Gideon, if you're a willing participant in that. Tamsin, did you want to say anything more?
Yeah, just really briefly, we are working extremely closely with Natural England partners on this, so thank you for the support we're getting from Natural England. It's been really superb. We're meeting them weekly to kind of progress the LNRS. I think in terms of getting involved with the local nature recovery strategy, we have got a website on the kind of Your Voice page on the Combined Authority. There's an email there to sign up for bulletins. The first bulletin went out, I believe, yesterday, so I'd be glad to have all of your email addresses on that if you'd like to volunteer them onto that website, or let me know and give me permission to put you on our distribution list. We'll be launching stakeholder engagement stuff further down the line. We're just launching the farmer engagement work fairly soon as a first part of doing that. And yes, just to reiterate the open invitation for someone from this committee to join our professional and academic board to support the LNRS. I'd very much like a kind of interface between the work we're doing and yourselves as someone that I can check in with a bit more routinely and keep updated about the LNRS. So if anybody's interested in supporting that, I'll be glad to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamsin. I have to say that one of the things that's on my mind, and you'll realise it's a theme of mine, in terms of the acronyms in this area. Every area has got its own acronyms. But if I'm knocking on people's doorsteps for a discussion about local issues, they are not going to mention BNG or LNRS. And so one of my challenges back to Natural England is making this real in terms of people. What's our narrative as members of this committee and as politicians and as businesses? What's our narrative really in terms of what is this set of things and why is it important really? So I guess I'm not necessarily expecting an answer on the spot, but inviting some of those strong words that we can use with our own fellow councillors and others who are not as familiar with this agenda.
I think that's a good challenge, and we've recently had a journalist, Mariana Chotter, come to talk to our staff around how we can communicate in really simple and quite emotive language, actually. I mean, at its heart, this is about thriving nature for everyone and all the benefits that brings to people. But I recognise we need to tailor the message, certainly on the doorstep, to different audiences. Martin, I just wanted to pick up your point around brownfield developments and biodiversity net gain. So, again, what I can do is I can put you in touch with DEFRA policy colleagues who own that, if that's helpful. There is a kind of a wide, almost academic debate around how we measure the best parts of biodiversity and where it resides and how we treat brownfield versus greenfield. But I'm very happy to take that up offline if that'd be helpful.
Thank you. I'll draw this part of the agenda to close. I just wanted to say, and as Councillor Patient knows as well, one of the things, and I don't know if it's a post-flooding thing, is that cormorants have taken up residence in Mytham Ride in Calderdale, and we're worried that this is a kind of harbinger of things to come, but it clearly shows the biodiversity brought about by flooding sometimes. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to something now that is something that this committee has, I know in the past, spent quite a lot of time thinking about the issues to do with transport, the range of issues to do with transport, and our sustainability and climate emergency issues. Now, Paul and Oliver, I suppose I should say to you, feel free to slip away or feel free to attend for the rest of the business of the meeting. It's entirely up to you. Thank you very much. Okay, Liz, is it Stacey? Who's going to Stacey? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to seek endorsement for the development of the sustainability strategy for mass transit and seek your views in terms of the process to date and emerging priorities that will be used in the formation of the strategy. So the aim of the strategy is to provide clear sustainability outcomes and commitments that act as golden threads and guide the project from feasibility through to operation. A 4-stage process is being developed to produce a strategy based on a review of relevant policies and background information, stakeholder workshops, prioritisation to identify key sustainability outcomes, and then finally strategy development to set a framework, agree priority outcomes and develop a public-facing strategy document. So the project is now partway through the prioritisation phase and 28 key sustainability outcomes have been narrowed down to 16, which will be used to develop the outcomes. This has been undertaken through workshops with district partner authorities, statutory environmental and health bodies, and they have identified emerging priorities across 4 sustainability pillars, which are transport, economic, environmental and social, as set out in Appendix 1. So it's important to note that where sustainability topics haven't been identified as a priority for this strategy, this does not mean that we do not consider them to be important. It may be that in considering the wider policy ecosystem at a project, organisation or regional level, that those priorities are already identified and being progressed through other means. An example of this in context is equality, diversity and inclusion, which is absolutely a priority for us as an organisation and project, but the development of the transit will ensure that the scheme is inclusive and accessible for all users and lead to equitable distribution and benefits. The sustainability strategy is not necessarily the place or the vehicle to achieve this. So today we are seeking input from the committee in terms of the process and approach to date and emerging priorities which will be used to develop the sustainability strategy. I will bring a further paper in due course to update committee members on the strategy development and seek further input as necessary or desired. So I think I'm happy to take any comments and views in terms of the process to date, as I've said. There's also Appendix 2, which presents opportunities for sustainability accreditation across a variety of topics. So I'd also be interested in understanding what views about the potential opportunities in terms of accreditation are as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey, and thank you for being quite so responsive, given I've skipped an item on the agenda and gone straight on from Natural England to item 10. Apologies for that. And I have to say, officers should not be so polite and should say to the chair, I think you've jumped an item, but we're here and we'll carry on with item 10 and then go back to 9, if that's okay. For those who are not quite so familiar with the concept and history of mass transit, I think it might be helpful just to say a little bit about the concept and perhaps some of the models elsewhere in Europe, for example in Dublin and so on, in terms of this early stage of thinking about what this beast mass transit is. Now, I don't know, Stacey, if that's you or Liz, in terms of just thinking at this early stage, it's almost it's conceptual and design stage in terms of understanding what this is for this committee purposes, in terms of therefore then going on to really try and understand some of the sustainability issues around mass transit. And I think we can take it as a given that, you know, a green, you know, energy efficient, a decarbonised mass transit system is generally a thing that's good for the climate. I think we take that as a given. And we're now at those very early stages in terms of design, funding, all of those kind of things. So really the question is at this very early stage of what are some of our initial thoughts about sustainability. But do you or Liz want to just say a little bit about what mass transit is?
Yeah, I can. So I think the first point that I want to make is that mass transit is only effective and efficient if it works as part of a wider integrated public transport offer. So mass transit needs to work collectively with bus, for example. It needs to work effectively with active mode of travel as well. And it needs to be part of the sort of wider agenda or ambition to take journeys away from private car, which will ultimately lead to a benefit in terms of climate impact. So, as you said, we're working hard behind the scenes in terms of developing the business case for mass transit. It's the very early stages. We've developed a mass transit vision that's been out to public consultation, which sort of sets the strategic ambitions for mass transit in terms of a West Yorkshire prospect. And we've also recently adopted an approach to placemaking and design philosophy approach for mass transit that really sort of pictures mass transit in from a perspective of it being a people and a place-based prospect rather than just a transport intervention. Obviously, it's going to work effectively as a transport intervention, but we're really interested in what the wider benefits and opportunities are, so the place-based benefits and opportunities. And from a climate perspective, as you said, if we deliver a green system that is respectful of the environment that it's in and also leads to benefits in terms of reductions in carbon emissions, for example, then it's going to benefit our people and places as a result of that. So what we're trying to do through development of sustainability strategies is really to set some clear sustainability outcomes for mass transit so that we can use them to drive everything that we're doing in terms of programme development activity, but also so that we can be measured against them as well. So when we look back when the first phase is operating, we can look back to this strategy to say, okay, what were we trying to achieve through the sustainability strategy, and have we achieved those ambitions? So I think this sort of early feasibility work's really important in terms of the setting the tone of what we're trying to achieve, and then ultimately so that we can be measured against those outcomes further down the line when we've got an operating world-class system.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Gideon and then Jack.
Yeah, thank you very much. It looks really useful and helpful. I note that there is actually a consultation out at the moment on the mass transit, and to be honest, I started to download some of the documents and open them up. It is a minefield. It is not easy for anyone to pick up and just go and make comments on it. So I think we need to be conscious of that for the general public, because it's going to take a lot of wading through it if you've not been involved with it. On this, I think you've got a really good job on the sustainability accreditation side of it and where you're starting from. There's a few things. I'm an accreditation geek, so sorry about that, but if you want some help with that, I'll happily give you some thoughts. But I did notice in the documents, you know, you've got some ISO standards that you could very easily pick off. You mentioned PAS 2080, But you've also got the greenhouse gas emissions, 14064s. You've also got, for your procurement, you might want to think about 2400, which is about sustainable procurement. And so there's other things that we can add into this and build into it as well, I think, that would make it even more robust. So thank you.
That's very useful, Gideon. Thank you. Jack?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Gideon's already made the comments I intend to make about consultation, which I concur with. I think the only other remark from me is to check whether or not the government or DFT have been in touch following the Prime Minister's commitment to build the tram in Leeds with regards to how much funding we might be looking to receive for this project.
We're not necessarily going to get into the politics of announcements, re-announcements, U-turns and things, but we won't lose the opportunity, trust me, Councillor, we will not lose the opportunity to push the case for West Yorkshire from this committee and from others. There's no question of that. Yes, Liz.
Thank you. Keeping momentum going with the project is really welcome, so probably won't say too much more on that. Just to say on the consultation, so just to be really clear, I think we've got a couple of things out at the moment. So on mass transit, which is the kind of physical infrastructure that we're going to be putting in place. And my understanding is, Stacey, but do correct me if I'm wrong, so we've had a consultation fairly recently, and the Combined Authority at the last meeting adopted and agreed the mass transit vision, which is great, and we're now planning for future consultation and take on board your comments. The consultation that's out at the moment is around bus franchising, which is related to mass transit but is different, because the bus franchising is about the relationship we have with the bus network and the private sector. So just to be super clear, the two are related but different.
Adam.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to check, is the mass transit strategy within region, or does it cover commuting out or heading out of region as well?
I think that's a really valid point. So in terms of the mass transit vision, it's restricted to West Yorkshire. However, in terms of the potential patronage and the flows of people, our ability to draw patronage from outside of the region, that's very much built into the transport modelling that sits behind the processes that we've been talking about in terms of business case development. We will need to demonstrate to Department for Transport and the Treasury that we've got the customers for the transit system, and actually understanding the region and how it operates and how it pulls in visitors from outside the region that potentially will use the system as an important part of that jigsaw.
Thank you all. And we look forward genuinely to seeing this unfold, really, as a group of councils and as the mayoral authority. I hope I'm alive to see it finally finished and travel on it. I'm sure it will be. But I think it's important that this committee has a regular update, or maybe irregular update, when there's something to report in terms of the way things are moving. We really want to basically make sure that we're travelling in the same direction and key issues are picked up. Thank you very much, Stacey. And now, if committee and officers will bear with me, we'll go back to item 9, Better Homes Hub. And if officers could try and keep me more on the stage, straight and narrow from now on, please. Right, item 9, Nadia.
Thanks, Chair. So just as a brief introduction to this paper. So the purpose of the report was to provide committee with an update on the Better Homes Hub, which is a programme that you've heard about a few times now, and also to seek input on 2 business cases which have been submitted as part of the programme. So these are the Calderdale area-based scheme and the low interest retrofit loan. So we're really keen for committee members' thoughts on 2 things. Firstly, how we can ensure quality of installation through the low interest loan whilst not placing a significant burden on residents. That's something that we've been thinking about and would be really keen on people's thoughts if you have any. And secondly, on the mechanisms that could be implemented to ensure a seamless offer between the two projects, so the area-based schemes and the low-interest loan. If it would be useful, I'm happy to give a quick overview of the low-interest retrofit loan, and then also Sarah and Ariba are here, and we'll answer any questions that people have.
Looking round to Gideon.
Can I just check, in the paper in 217, you're talking about, well, you talk about it through, but the energy efficiency. What are we actually talking about with energy efficiency? Are we including renewable energy in that as well? Because it seems like the amount of money in the pot and the ambition is fairly low in comparison to sort of 18.33 a year would be the amount of loans that we're giving out for that. And appreciate money's tight, but 16,000 probably isn't going to go too far if you want a heat pump plus a lot of other things too. Thank you.
Thanks, Gideon. Yeah, so this is a scheme where I guess people are able to decide what measures they install. So in terms of eligibility, we are open to insulation, thermal efficiency, renewables, like you say, solar, heat pumps, all of the above really. Ultimately, it's going to depend on each house, so the circumstances, the priorities of the individual homeowner. So in terms of modelling for this project, to come up with the kind of estimated benefits, we have had to make some assumptions. So for that, we've assumed an average loan value of £16,000. And for that, so we got Waterman involved to do the modelling, and I can't remember the exact details, but it was something like a solar panel system plus some insulation. They looked at a few different options, kind of what you could get for 16,000. Ultimately, the minimum loan is 5,000 and the maximum is 25,000. So there is some variation in that. We've just had to kind of make an assumption in order to do the modelling for this.
Can I just pick up on that? Does that get infringed by government grants as well? So there's £7,500 for a heat pump at the moment. I know state aid type things have always got in the way of this kind of thing, and then you can't have one and the other. So I was just wondering if you could maybe comment on that.
Yeah, thank you. So in my mind, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm saying anything out of turn, Liz, or anyone else, but there's nothing stopping people from combining the two. So state aid comes into effect where we are dealing with the private landlords, and in that instance, we basically just have to make sure that landlords are not receiving over 300,000 of total state aid in three consecutive years. So there will be a process in place to make sure that we are complying with state aid for private landlords. But in terms of the owner-occupiers and the landlords, as long as state aid complies, there should be nothing stopping people from kind of doing both.
Thank you. Martin.
Thanks, Nadia. Is the terms of the loan offered, is it planned to be a repayment loan, an interest-only loan? Presumably it's going to be secured against the property, is it? And things like that? Just because that's going to affect the take-up. And the second question is, are you, in terms of offering the loan, are you going to try and pull policy? You mentioned that people will be able to choose what measures they install, but are you going to try and kind of adopt, suppose, good practice in terms of fabric first and or measures which not only improve energy efficiency and therefore could be taken as a comfort dividend over and above actually reducing carbon emissions? So, encouraging, incentivising low carbon heat, for example, those kind of things.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, so on the interest rate, so it's 3.26%. That is repaying the loan and with interest on top. And so the idea of the project is that as loan repayments come in, they can be recirculated, and then we can give out more loans to more people. So ultimately, we start off with a 1.5 million loan pot, but we end up giving out about 3.2 million of loans, because as those repayments come in, we give out more loans. In terms of the secured or unsecured, so it is an unsecured loan. So they take out the model that Lendology uses. They take out title restriction on the property. So there's nothing stopping anybody from putting the house up for sale, for example. It's just that if that does happen, then Lendology get notified by the solicitor. And then obviously we'll try and recoup the balance left on the loan as part of the house sale. And on the Fabric First, it's really interesting. It's one of those that we would love to push it. So it will be part of the conversation with the individuals. We'll recommend Fabric First. We'll recommend that people get a retrofit assessment. But ultimately, people are going to be able to make their own minds up. So I think once we've got the one-stop shop in place, this is kind of going slightly ahead of the one-stop shop. And once we've got the one-stop shop in place, that will be very much part of the journey. Until that stage, I think it's a recommendation.
Thank you. I've got Sarah, Katie, and then back to Gideon and Scott.
Thank you, Chair. It's linking into some of what Martin was asking, and I know it's a low interest rate, and what's affordable to quite a few of us around this table may not be quite so with the cost of living crisis. So someone may actually take a loan out, they're able to afford it, and the circumstances changed. And I just wondered what timeline periods were for repayment, and is that depending on the size of the loan?
I'm going to take those three questions, comments together, and then come back to the officers. So, Katie next.
Thank you. Mine was about in 220, you say that the loan will be part of a menu of finance options, and I wondered what other finance options were part of that.
Thank you. And I've got Gideon next, and then Scott. Gideon.
Yeah, mine a quick one. I think similar to the financial sort of how do you make sure that's going to get paid. But I was also wondering if you're looking at warranty back guarantee schemes or anything like that with it, which typically in the renewable sector we had when we were running when I was running the MCS scheme.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Yeah, be remiss not to mention that obviously we're pleased to be progressing the region's first area-based scheme, and good to be picked out there. And I guess look forward to sharing findings, which will be helpful for everyone. And as well as that, sort of Innovate UK research project on barriers to retrofit as well, I think will hopefully provide some important learning that we can share on that as well.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Adam, and then I'm going to ask the officers to do a quick roundup to finish that item. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just in the paper in 2.25 you talk about the quality aspect of the installations, and I just wondered if this is an opportunity to provide support to people who are undertaking this as a project. So it's daunting bringing someone into your house to do a load of work. Is there a way that you could offer a local trusted mark, so and assurance of the programme through delivery?
Right, over to you, Nadia.
Thanks. I'll try my best. I've sort of jotted all this down. So in terms of how affordable the loan is the loan, I guess was the first question, I believe. So we're very aware that this won't be attractive or viable for everybody. We're looking to kind of test viability. You know, is there interest out there for people to borrow money to retrofit their homes? So it probably is quite a niche segment of the market. It's people that are thinking about retrofitting their home, probably already quite motivated, but don't quite have the money. So if we partner with Lendology, I should say, because we are looking at an alternative open procurement, what they tend to do is they'll have a conversation with people about their situations and circumstances, and sometimes it might be that the loan isn't the best thing for them, in which case they get signposted to the local authority for grants, for example. In terms of how long is the length of the loan, so it's 10 years is the standard length of loan. However, there will be an opportunity for people to repay sooner if they're able to, with no additional charges. For the financial options, so we're looking to partner with the Green Finance Institute to kind of explore other more innovative options such as property-linked finance, climate bonds, things like that. So we'll definitely be able to come back with some more information on that. It's very kind of early stages at this stage. In terms of warranty back schemes, happy to have a conversation with you offline, Gideon, because I'm not sure I kind of fully understand that one, and it sounds like you've got some experience in that, so let's pick that up. And then in terms of quality, it's something we've been thinking a lot about, because as part of the one-stop shop, we would like to help people through that process. That's definitely part of the kind of purpose of the one-stop shop, and creating a trusted supplier list is top on the agenda. We are going out with this slightly ahead of our plans for the one-stop shop, because that is a big project, and we're going through a consultancy piece of work with the Energy Saving Trust. So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation at the moment. So what we're hoping to do is sort of signpost people to things, existing mechanisms like Trustmark, MCS that Gideon's already mentioned, because there are some good ways for people to find quality contractors that are already kind of existing in the marketplace. And then long term, as you say, kind of help people and guide people through that process.
Gideon, yes, a quick one.
Just a very quick one. I'm aware that the likes of MCS and the other parts of this, it's the big companies now that are surviving this. A lot of the small companies have gone out of the industry, and if we should understand how many we have in this area as well, and whether we need to nurture some back into it as well, because I think there could be a dearth of people if we're not careful.
Thank you for that, Gideon. In terms of what is required further from this committee, having had that initial discussion and the points that the officers are taking away, and clearly there's a point about seeking suitable accreditation, and thank you to Gideon in particular for his help there, and that overall I think we're hearing from the committee that they endorse their approach. I don't know, Martin, anything further to add from your perspective on that? Thank you. And I don't think there's anything further to add on that particular item. No, last call. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on then to the next two items, 11 and 12, and I think, James, you have stepped into the vacancy left by illness and are going to talk to us about electric vehicle infrastructure, and then we'll move on to air quality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So if we deal with the electric vehicle infrastructure paper to begin with, it's a fairly broad paper. This paper on us to write the electric vehicle infrastructure strategy, and that will be part of the new local transport plan, which we're looking to have adopted in 2025. In paragraph 2.9, you've got the sort of draft principles for this new strategy. Working with the University of Leeds to identify where broad charging location infrastructure is likely to be. It has to be targeted off-street parking, but nothing is set in stone at this stage. It's very much a work in progress, so we're very much at the formative stages of this. We're also working to promote the use of renewable energy sources for charging points, it's worth noting, and working closely with our district partners to overcome the challenges of on-street parking. We're also ensuring that we develop the right terms to work effectively with the market to both accelerate delivery but also prevent market failure, because I think there's potential risk of sort of picking off the perhaps wealthier areas and leaving other areas behind. So appreciate that's a bit of a general overview of the paper, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions or take points away, Chair.
Thank you, and it's a rapidly changing landscape, and in some ways relates to previous things that we've discussed. Apologies for the microphones. I understand from officers that there's a problem with some of the microphones, so you are fading in and out there slightly, James, but we got the gist and we've got the paper in front of us. Any comments on this update on EV charging? Further thoughts? I'm going to take Scott and then Gideon.
Thank you. I mean, only briefly to endorse really the sort of direction of travel, but looking back to the monitoring indicators earlier and where it mentions EV, just bearing in mind that we're managing the spread and the deployment of the charging to make sure that those places that are down in the quote unquote rankings, you know, do get up to speed when it comes to quality and quantity in terms of the infrastructure elsewhere in the sub-region.
Gideon?
Yeah, thanks. I've got a few comments. One, I haven't seen anything in here about work charging stations and how that's going to influence it. Not everyone's going to need on-street parking. In fact, I'm very against on-street parking. I do a lot of work in EV charging. And the reason being that there's a lot of other cars out there and they could be fighting for those spaces. So hub charging and things like that might be a better way of doing it. I'm not saying it's not right for everywhere, but it's certainly an issue that we've seen in some places. So I'm just wondering, sort of in terms of the numbers that are in here, how that actually fits and what the relationship is with this item and item 11 when you get to it. But also the space size needs to be appropriate for the vehicles and accessibility as well. And there's been quite a bit of difficulty with that in some places. So just a thought for you.
Thank you. I'll just take Martin before we come back to James.
Thanks, Chair. It's kind of on the it is on the on-street parking issue, charging issue, but not really from the perspective of publicly provided charging points. It's more from the perspective of people using proprietary channels for cables to run from their house. So you don't have to have a private driveway to have a private supply to feed your car. Now, first, I know that's a planning issue and a highways issue, but then so with things like drop curbs and things like that, and we've been doing those for years, so I don't see why we couldn't. But there's nothing in the paper that seems to be promoting that as part of the solution, which for me I think is partly because I think it's still the case that we pay 5% VAT on our private energy supplies, but on any commercial electricity that we put into our cars, we pay 20% VAT. So it's fundamentally more expensive to charge your car at a public charger than it is on a private one.
Thank you. Well, that was a fact I didn't know. And I think you rightly raised the issue that we've got, particularly in West Yorkshire, in our post-industrial heritage, in terms of terraced houses, streets which have to be used, which have to be shared by people with mobility difficulties, wheelchairs, buggies, etc. And that question of channels and so on is a real challenge to us, actually. I take your point about the VAT and the public chargers, but actually public chargers must be an answer in some places. And those of you who are sharp listening will have heard a faint Scottish tone in my accent, and I'm very impressed by some of the experiments in Scotland, particularly in places like Dundee, where they have on-street EV charging just everywhere outside tenement buildings, and it's just matter of fact, everybody just accepts that, and of course you've got, you get rid of the problem of trailing wires into tenement flats and so on. So I think there's a lot we can learn about the use of the public realm, in particular pavements. And I think what you say about thinking about the way in which we tackle drop curbs and disability issues is quite an interesting model to follow. I'm good to come back to James now to round up the item that we're, I think, just noting.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me a bit better now. So first of all, thanks very much for the input. I think if we're not doing so already, we probably need to reach out to colleagues on the committee to ensure we're getting your input for the strategy. So thank you for that, and we will make sure we do that through governance services. Secondly, I perhaps conflated the two separate issues in the paper. First of all is the strategy, and the second is the I think it's called the Levi funding, which is the funding which has been allocated, probably with a small a, to West Yorkshire. We still have to make a proposal, make a bid for it, which comes with certain strings attached. So I do take all the comments on board, they're really helpful, but I think there are certain things that we have to include in the Levi bid, which already are given to us. So, but yeah, certainly welcome colleagues' input as we develop the strategy further, so thank you.
Thank you, James. And it'd be interesting to hear what other combined authorities who in this particular space are saying in terms of their particular issues in their places. Actually, it'd be interesting to just compare where we all are really, in future updates. Thank you very much. So that's noted, and we'll move on, if we may, to item 12, air quality, and I think that's you again, James.
It is, yeah. By way of a brief introduction, the general thrust of this paper is basically sort of saying that the West Yorkshire low emission strategy has come to an end, or come to the end of its sort of life, and that the West Yorkshire Low Emission Strategy Delivery Group, to a mouthful, is doing more work now, but focused much more on particulates, and that's in preparation for a new air quality strategy for the region. At a national level, recent government study work and data has found that actually only about 12% of particulates, particularly PM 2.5, comes from road transport. So as part of the West Yorkshire Local Emission Strategy Delivery Group, we're doing more work on this to understand the wider sources of particulates in West Yorkshire, and that will all be wrapped up into the new air quality strategy. So again, this is really an update on the work to develop a new air quality strategy with a focus on particulates, Chair.
Thank you. That's very interesting and does add to our knowledge. I'm particularly interested in the two Leeds universities and the work that they're doing on that. Neil?
Just wondering, in light of that, with the new strategy and the focus on particulate matter, is that something to include in the analysis of the indicators that we talked about earlier?
James? I don't think you were here for that discussion, but we looked at the state of the region indicators, and people were commenting on the existing indicators and the methodology, and the suggestion is maybe this is something we could look at in terms of further indicators to look at it in a dashboard sort of arrangement. I don't know, James or Liz, if you want to comment.
Well, it seemed very sensible. I'll be honest, I'm not an expert in air quality, but I would have thought there'd be a number of indicators, but this is no doubt one of them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I recognise that Peter's had to go, but we'll pick up with Peter about what's available. I think we do already do some of these, but we can certainly, particularly with the new strategy, we ought to look at what's part of that and then what this committee might want to see.
Right, Scott, and then Jenny and Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. And very much sort of linked to the previous one, although EV isn't going to be a panacea for all air quality woes. What we should be mindful of doing is not just waiting for policy to sort of catch up with this and provide us all of the solutions. It's not just about electrifying the fleet, it's about providing modal shift options for people. And as I'm sure while different local authorities are delivering climate action plans or whatever at varying different degrees, there is things that are within our scope, and then there are very much things that are out of our gift, and transport's a big sort of part of that. So I guess really looking towards some quite sort of bold, innovative ways to do that just don't rely on other sort of policy areas, and some of that might be nature restoration, some of that might be planting in biodiversity net gain projects, but actually also what we do need as authorities is a real conversation on hierarchy of road use.
Thank you. Jenny?
Yeah, thank you. I don't know, because this might be following on and amplifying what Scott's saying, because you're under transport, but I wondered if you're also looking at other sources of emissions which affect air quality, particularly small particulates such as heating and domestic cooking appliances, and also whether you're looking at indoor air quality, which very little work is currently being done on, but is significantly damaging to public health.
Thank you, Jenny. Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, obviously in Bradford we've done quite a lot of work on this, and I just wondered if you'd linked into the clean air team on Bradford Council, and also Born in Bradford, who've been looking at particular matter and the health outcomes linked to children, babies and children, because some of the data that they've got is that it shows that particulate matter transfers through the placenta through pregnancy into the unborn child, and they've got quite a lot of information around that area.
Thank you, Sarah. Born in Bradford, fantastic project. You must be very proud of it. Katie and then Jack.
My question's already been asked because I was just going to inquire about whether indoor particulates were within the scope of this, so you can...
Jack?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just want to follow up on what Scott said earlier in terms of those air quality particulates that aren't necessarily directly within our control, thinking of my own area and probably West Yorkshire more broadly in terms of the motorway network. We know that is a significant contributor to poor air quality. I just wonder what our relationship's like with Highways England, how we're working with them on that agenda. Is the scope to work with them and landowners along the motorway network more closely to get some more tree planting done, to look at things like, I know Sheffield have got a reduction in motorway speed in that section of the M1, for instance, to improve air quality. What's the scope for closer working around the highway network and the motorway network in particular?
Thank you. James, you've got quite a lot to go away at with there. I wonder if you could just give a few responses, and then I'm going to have to move us on the agenda.
Okay, well, first of all, thanks very much for your inputs. So in terms of the broader look at the determinants of air quality, I think from my understanding of the paper is that the work with the universities and with districts is looking in the round. It's not just about transport, it's across all areas of the economy, I guess. We've obviously picked out transport for an obvious reason, I guess, today. But we can certainly take that away, and I can confirm perhaps via governance services. I think the member mentioned about the sort of links with the Clean Air team in Bradford. I know we are working closely with them. I'm unaware about the link with the Born in Bradford project, but again, I can take that away and confirm. I think there's, in terms of the links with Highways England, I think there's clearly, we do have a relationship with them. I don't know what the state of that is. To be totally honest, I'm week 3 into my new role here, so I'm sure there's scope to improve and continue to work closely with them. And I would say the points about modal shift and transport policy, that's one of the major functions of the combined authorities, the local transport authority. So it's ultimately it's within, we'll be working collectively on the new local transport plan over the coming, we're doing it now. So there's lots of scope to be imaginative and ambitious.
Thank you. And thank you very much, James, for standing in there. David, one last word on this. And Katie.
So, thanks, Chair, but I wasn't indicating to speak. Yeah. Thank you.
And I was just going to re-ask the question about whether indoor particulates are within the scope of this work.
I don't know, but I'll find out.
Thank you.
We like an honest answer here, actually. Thank you very much. Well, the committee are asked to note the work that's underway, and we look forward to having that coming back to this committee. So I'll move on to the last substantive item on the agenda, and that's the project approvals item, and I'm going to ask Alison to stand in for Noel. I think the officers are doing a tremendous job at the last minute here. Alison.
Thank you, Chair. So as you know, this committee has delegated decision-making authority. So investment decisions relating to priority 4 of the West Yorkshire investment strategy, tackling the climate emergency and environmental sustainability, come to this committee for approval where possible. So this report seeks approval for a change request to an existing programme. It's the Net Zero Regional Accelerator Programme. So the committee will be familiar with the programme. Progress is regularly reported in the pledge update paper, which is the standing item next on your agenda. It's a flexible revenue programme. It allows investment in net zero projects, often at really early stages of development, to move them forward. So the current programme funding runs to March 2024, and all of the funding that has been made available has been allocated. So the programme budget was £960,000. The funding's been used to fund a senior officer post in the Combined Authority. That officer provides advice and support across the region on net zero projects. It's also been prioritised for projects relating to decarbonisation of energy and buildings, which are two of the sectors with the highest carbon emissions in the region. So the report lists the projects that have benefited from the funding already at paragraph 4.11. So today we're seeking approval to extend the programme from March 2024 to March 2027, so an extension of 3 years, and we're seeking approval to increase the programme budget to just over 3 million, so £3,020,000. We've engaged with local authority partners in confirming a continued strategic need for the programme. We're still finding that in some cases projects are not developing at the pace that we need to meet our net zero 2038 target. So this is a market failure issue, and that's noted in paragraph 4.15. So the paper states that local area energy planning is underway, and that will generate a pipeline of projects. Calderdale Council is the most advanced with that work. And the paper also notes that Huddersfield District District Heat Energy Network will be supported by the programme. So that's a project that seeks to further develop the use of low carbon heat from the energy from waste plant in Huddersfield through its commercialisation phase. So the Combined Authority at their meeting on the 12th of October delegated authority for this programme to this committee. It's referred to as the scheme in the report, just for the avoidance of doubt. And the programme benefits and outputs are listed in section 4.20. So paragraph 4.45 sets out the recommendations, which I will go through. So we are asking that the committee approves, subject to conditions, the change request to extend the scope of the Net Zero Regional Accelerator Scheme to change the total scheme cost from 960,000 to 3,020,000 and to extend the scheme's delivery time frame from March 24 to 2027. An approval to the Combined Authority's contribution, delegation for approval for any future grant funding arrangements and associated development funding to the Director of Policing, Environment and Place, which is Liz Hunter. And then future approvals are to be made in accordance with the assurance pathway and approval route outlined in the report. This will be subject to the scheme remaining within the tolerances set out, and where required, any future committee level approvals are delegated to this committee. So that was a bit of a mouthful, but I'll pass back to you, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Alison? Gideon.
Sorry, I seem to be talking a lot. The item on Huddersfield District Energy Network, two things I want to raise there. One, there's just been an announcement by the government that all energy from waste plants will need to be CCS going forward, and it's almost impossible, I think, from a geographic location and also from a financial one to make these things work. So I think we need to think about that very carefully on that part of it. The other thing is that I don't know what they're doing after 2037, but certainly a long time ago they were talking about going back to gas again. So I'm a little bit concerned that you know, we know that the waste strategy is changing. We know that the calorific value is changing in the mix of the materials going into the plants in the first place. And so whether these things are going to be viable going forwards is something we need to consider very carefully. Thank you. Not that I don't support it, by the way.
But it's a useful reminder, really, in this volatile political environment that we seem to be in, and that means I'm guessing I'm not seeing lots of hands that people are content in terms of the direction of those recommendations. But Gideon gives us a welcome reminder that actually some of those may have to come back to this committee for further variations, because it's a fast-moving environment in terms of government views on these things. Scott, were you indicating to come in?
Just very briefly, Chair. Thank you. And obviously, Calderdale's done quite well out of that fund, and we really appreciate that. Probably just worth noting that the building feasibility work has supported a bid to the public sector decarbonisation fund, which went in, which is sort of really positive. I just want to check something else with you, Chair, because I've been called away. Will we still be quorate if I leave?
I'm not. No.
Yes, we will.
Yes, we will.
This is the decision. This is the only decision. So
This is the only decision. Could you just hold on for 2 seconds?
we will be for it. Sorry.
Can I take those 4 recommendations as one, and can I have an indication from the voting members whether they are content with these 4 recommendations? Right. Thank you very much. You may go, Councillor. Thank you. And we'll move on to the final item of the agenda, pledge delivery update. Liz?
I think we tend to bring these papers as a reminder of everything else that's going on, as well as the topics that we've covered in detail in the committee. So I think we're just happy to take any questions, although most of our team are not here, so hopefully between Alison and I we can. And Kevin, we've got Kevin, brilliant. So if there's any questions on the papers, we're still in, we'll be happy to take them.
Katie.
Can I just raise something on the green skills report that's at the end of our papers? I read that with real interest, and I think the work with young people is absolutely crucial, and we've discussed that at length at previous meetings. But it's a small point, but to me it's a very important point, that I had a good look this morning through the materials that have been released for schools, which I think is absolutely great. And the first thing you see on the website when you click on it is a nice shiny video. I thought, great, I'll watch that with interest. And every single person in that nice shiny video is a white man, which doesn't really fit with the bit on whatever page that says that EDI is a really important point. And I was just thinking of, people who are sitting there watching that in their classrooms. That's quite an important point, that people see themselves reflected in the materials that are shown to them in schools. So,
thank you, Katie, and thank you for looking at those things. And the officers and myself will be taking that away. Adam.
Oh,
sorry, not
Jim.
Chim.
No problem. It was on the pathways point. I thought it was really important the fact we've got a gap against the ambitions of 2038, and I note that there's nothing to say here other than there's some work to be done between now and a paper coming back in May, which I think is really important. So I think it's a good thing to do. We've still got a gap to close. The figures were 17 to 25% reduction that we haven't got nailed out how we're going to achieve that. So I think that's really important business for this group to start thinking about some of that gap closure. So thank you.
Thank you, and that's exactly why Kevin is here as well, because Kevin's going to be leading the work for us on that. I think even to get to the percentages that where we think we can is a struggle, and so the additional is even harder. So we would, I think, through the work that Kevin's going to be leading on the pathways, this committee over many years has had many debates. Those of whom have been around about pathways work and technology choices. So we would really welcome your input as we develop that. Kevin, was there anything that you particularly wanted to say about the time period of the work and how we're going to involve the committee?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, yeah, you're quite right. Obviously, it'd be great to hear the committee's views on sort of the pathways as it's kind of developed, and sort of to close that 17 to 25% gap, and it is envisaged that the pathways will come back. I mean, sort of related to this is obviously the fact that we also need to refresh our climate and environment plan, because that runs to 2024. So throughout the course of next year, we'll be updating that. And one of the questions, so obviously the pathways are sort of the key evidence base for the CEP, for the plan. So as well as kind of updating that, what we also need to think about is kind of consultation on the CEP, sort of we're at a very early stage of thinking about what the next iteration of the CEP might look like. So I think the report today is, would welcome kind of members' views on if there's any kind of particular consultees you'd like us to engage with, or any particular kind of way of approaching consultation on the refresh for the plan. That would be appreciated. And if it's a bit sort of, spur of the moment, if you're happy to take comments sort of later via the chair if need be.
Thank you, Kevin. Jenny?
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on David's earlier point, just because it's a CEP refresh, whether you're considering other gases apart from carbon. So it's a notable lack from York, but because methane is quite crucial, but York doesn't have too much of methane emissions, but you're a much larger region, so I wondered if that was on your radar.
Yes, I think it's envisaged that the pathways will be CO2e is what they'll be measuring.
Specific, I mean, maybe it's too much detail at this stage, just flagging that up from David's point, really, yeah. Specific targets for individual gases. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, that's noted. Okay, thank you for that, and thank you, Liz and Kevin. That concludes the business of the meeting, apart from a notification of the date of the next meeting, which is not till February the 13th. Really. Winter is upon us, and I hope that we all get through winter with without the flooding and other climate events that we've all had to deal with. Thank you very much, committee.